Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight.
With ShotSpotter, we're in a situation where there are clearly costs and risks.
Chicago police say gunshot detectors are an important tool, but a new report says it influences officers' behavior on the streets.
Chicago officials thinking of setting up a legal defense fund? Not so fast. The Ethics Board has a new warning. We share the details.
Feeling stuck in a pandemic purgatory? A psychologist offers tips for dealing with COVID anxiety.
Governor J.B. Pritzker signs new sex education standards into law, what they're meant to teach, and why critics disapprove.
26% of Black Chicago public school students experience homelessness during their time at the district. New research on the impact of housing insecurity on students.
If you're telling yourself the story.
In advance of an upcoming Wilco show at Millennium Park, we have the man himself, Jeff Tweedy, joins us from the tour bus to talk about returning to the road and his love of Chicago.
It made us feel better about our future in terms of, his independence.
And a Chicago bakery where the people are the icing on the cake. But first, some of today's top stories. Travelers from nearly every state in the country are being asked to quarantine or receive a negative COVID test when traveling to Chicago if they're unvaccinated. The city today added 4 states, Colorado, Maryland, Nebraska, and South Dakota, to its weekly COVID-19 travel advisory as cases continue to rise across the country. The total number is now 43 states and 2 territories under the advisory. The city's test positivity rate is 4.5%, up from 4.4% 7 days ago. Cryptocurrency ATM operator CoinFlip is doubling down on Chicago, literally doubling the size of its operations with a 44,000 square foot headquarters at the old post office.
This marks the largest cryptocurrency lease here in the state of Illinois. And this further cements CoinFlip as a homegrown company that was founded and built right here in Chicago. Our new headquarters is an investment in our commitment to create new jobs and build upon the culture that made us the fastest growing company in Chicago in 2020.
CoinFlip already has 138 jobs in its Chicago office and says it'll add at least 30 more. It has signed a 12-year lease and will make an overall $17 million capital investment. Loyola basketball legend Jerry Harkness has died at the age of 81. Harkness was a 2-time All-American and captain of the Ramblers' 1963 national championship team. That team is also remembered for its role in the legendary Game of Change when Loyola played Mississippi State in the NCAA tournament. At the time, because Mississippi law forbade teams from playing integrated games, the 2 teams matched up in East Lansing, Michigan, after the Mississippi State team snuck out of town under cover of darkness. Harkness was one of 4 black starters on the team that year, a first for a championship team. He still ranks 6th in Loyola history with 1,749 points. And on a programming note, we promoted and had expected to be joined tonight by Chicago Fraternal Order of Police President John Catanzara, but he canceled at the last minute and said he will not be on the show tonight. Up next, a report raising questions about gunshot detection technology. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Chicago's Inspector General for Public Safety is out with a report critical of technology the Chicago Police Department spends millions of dollars on every year to combat gun violence. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda, what's the latest?
Yes, Paris, the CPD in December actually renewed a contract worth $33 million to keep using ShotSpotter for a couple of years from now, August of 2023. This is technology that uses sensors that are strategically placed around the city and especially in high crime areas to detect the sound of gunshots. The company also relies on data and an algorithm to triangulate where those shots were fired. Then The Chicago Police Department is notified so officers can head to that precise location. The new report from the Inspector General's office reaches a stark conclusion. Only rarely does ShotSpotter actually lead police to recover evidence from a gun crime. A large percentage of ShotSpotter alerts cannot be connected to any verifiable shooting incident, the report concludes. The city's Deputy Inspector General for Public Safety, Deborah Witzberg, says the point of this report was not to make specific recommendations about ShotSpotter.
And we certainly don't conclude that there is no value to the use of ShotSpotter. What we are hoping with this analysis to do is to prompt a sort of sober, well-informed weighing of the costs and benefits attached to this technology. I think ShotSpotter is like lots of other law enforcement tools in that it should be subject to that sort of cost-benefit assessment where we make sure that the value of using a tool outweighs its drawbacks.
ShotSpotter clearly has costs, she says. Dollar-wise, it's expensive, that contract worth over $30 million. And then there are the costs you can't easily put a dollar figure on, like community concerns.
There are safety risks for police department members. A ShotSpotter alert response is a situation which is sort of fast-paced and high stakes, and a situation into which members of the police department are going with very little information about context and what to expect once they get there.
ShotSpotter issued a statement in response to this report saying that it works with its customers, and by the way, Chicago, its biggest customer, in order to maximize the value of this technology. Also, the OIG report does not negatively reflect on ShotSpotter's accuracy, which has been independently audited at 97% based on feedback from more than 120 customers, ShotSpotter said in that statement. Nor does the OIG propose that ShotSpotter alerts are not indicative of actual gunfire, whether or not physical evidence is recovered. Now, Witzberg says there, ShotSpotter is talking about technical accuracy, say that it is accurately identifying the sound of gunshots versus fireworks. She says this report isn't getting into that technical accuracy. She says what it is weighing is the question of whether it is valuable even if it works accurately all of the time. Arnice Myrick with Live Free Illinois says the answer to that is no.
We do need answers. We do need some type of remedy for gun violence. However, ShotSpotter isn't it. ShotSpotter has shown us time and time again, it's just sending officers on dead-end chases, on high alerts into our neighborhoods, and they're not recovering anything. And so I think this is a large investment to not have much, of a result that is truly helping to save lives.
To that end, she says that there are much better ways that Chicago taxpayer money could be used to combat violence and save lives.
We do not need to rely on old, broken police strategies that we know don't work, right? Instead, we would rather invest it straight into the community, into grassroots organizations who are already providing crime and violence interruption work. We think that it should go towards trauma-based services, hospital-based services, wraparound services, so that families are getting what they need.
Now, CPD says that ShotSpotter is crucial to its work and that it allows officers to go to a precise location quickly after a shooting. ShotSpotter has detected hundreds of shootings that would have otherwise gone unreported. ShotSpotter is among a host of tools used by the Chicago Police Department to keep the public safe and ultimately save lives, CPD says in that statement. Now, Jose Almanza says he doesn't want to live in a neighborhood where there is a lot of gun violence. Nobody does. But he says this tool does not work. Instead, he says it brings officers armed and ready for confrontations with people who look like him.
So all they're doing is just threatening, harassing, and violently harassing people like myself and other, Black and brown people in the neighborhood. So even if it was working, no, I wouldn't want this type of technology in my community.
Now, another reason that the CPD says that ShotSpotter is important is because they say it allows law enforcement to quickly help to find victims, identify witnesses, and to collect forensic evidence after shootings when a lot of gunshots are never called in to 911. The system gives police the opportunity to reassure communities that law enforcement is there to serve and protect them, and helps to build bridges with residents who wish to remain anonymous, the CPD says in its statement. Now, I asked Amanza to respond to CPD's defense.
So let's try to fix that problem. Why is it that people are not reporting these incidents, and they're just trying to, lock the community out and use technology to kind of just reinforce what they've been doing, and it's just harassing Black and brown people in Black and brown communities.
This is not the only study to question the efficacy of ShotSpotter. Deputy Inspector General Witzberg says it is notable that, therefore, this analysis is not an outlier. But this new report did touch on something else, that ShotSpotter can influence police behavior, that they behave differently, not just if there is a specific ShotSpotter ping, but even when police are sent to an area where they often get ShotSpotter alerts. And that, she says, is significant and worth further study. Now, you can get a link to this Inspector General's report and more on our website. One quick note, we did reach out to ShotSpotter and the CPD for interviews. We got the statements that we used in this story and said. With that, Paris, back to you.
All right, a lot to digest there, Amanda. Thank you so much. And up next, new sex education standards for Illinois students, so stick around.
It really is about community, where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
Governor J.B. Pritzker recently signed into law a new measure to update sex education for K-12 schools in Illinois. Supporters say the move will offer age-appropriate information, including teaching younger students about their personal health and safety. But critics say the new standards go too far. Joining us now are State Senator Ram Villavilla, a Democrat from Chicago and one of the law's sponsors, and State Representative Toni McCombie, a Republican from Savannah in northwestern Illinois, and she opposed the law. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, Senator Villavilla, let's start with you, please. The new law moves Illinois in line with the national sex education standards. Students will learn about topics that include consent and healthy relationships, gender identity and sexual orientation, and sexual health, among others. Why did you think it was necessary to adopt these standards?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. Look, we've all seen the news. We've all seen the reports. There's been a rise in child sex abuse scandals, sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual assault on college campuses, and bullying of LGBTQ students and people of color. Our youth see this coverage. They need medically and factually accurate information, as well as a safe environment to develop the skills they need to navigate our modern world. Senate Bill 818 does just that. It establishes requirements for public and charter schools that decide to teach this education that is age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate, and inclusive.
Now, there are other topic areas included as well, including anatomy and physiology, puberty and sexual development, as well as interpersonal violence. Representative McCombie, you say, though, that this bill misses the mark. Why?
Absolutely. Like several bills that is unfortunately passed out of Springfield, they always go too far. And this is just one of those. 6 years ago, there was a comprehensive bill that passed actually by the House sponsor, who also carried this one, Leader Lilly. And that at that time was for 6th to 12th grade, and this now goes from K to 12. And I think the senator and all of us on both sides of the aisle can agree that we want kids to know the difference of good touch, bad touch, bullying, health and safety precautions, also agree about learning about consent. But this here is determined, this curriculum will be designed on the national sex education standards. And that's where I have an issue. I don't understand why we're getting away from the state. Was there any data showing that the state wasn't developing curriculum that was keeping kids unsafe or in a position that they were not able to educate themselves. The age appropriate is also pretty sketchy, in my opinion, because it doesn't define it. So what one feels is appropriate for a K through 3, another might not.
Well,
so that's a big.
Let's get into that a little bit. Senator Villivalam, critics say, as we just heard from Representative McCombie, that the standards are not age appropriate. Are they broken down by age group, and how so?
Well, they are, and you give examples. We had a spirited debate in the Senate about this. In younger grades, for example, kindergarten through 2nd grade, the focus is personal safety, what it means to be a good friend, good touch and bad touch, and being able to talk to parents and trusted adults when someone wants you to do something that makes you uncomfortable or unsafe. I'll also add, though, we're not delegating to national standards. We have it in the law that says by August 1 of 2022, the Illinois State Board of Education shall adopt standards with input from youth, from parents, sexual health and violence prevention experts, healthcare providers. Additionally, schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials. And lastly, a parent or guardian still continues to have the right to opt their student out of instruction. So the argument that we're deferring to the national sex ed standards, I don't buy it. We put it in the law that appropriately, but we believe in our state and we want input from our youth, parents, and teachers.
To that end, Representative McCombie, you've called these standards sexually charged. We just heard from Senator Villivalam that parents are allowed to opt out. Districts that don't teach sex ed don't have to follow these new standards. Does that address any of your concerns?
Well, I strongly disagree. The curriculum will be designed using the national sex education standards. Now, I'm not saying that you have to use all of the standards that they define. They have several points in that. And one of the things, and it doesn't even say, there's 16 points that they want you to follow, and not one of those is medically accurate. Not one of those. So that's a big deal. They will be designed by this. And when you're talking about local control and opting out, what is wrong with state control? Why are we taking this on the national side? There was 8 Democrats in the House that voted against this with concerns because the state will no longer have control or be able to give input to these national standards. Now, the opt-out is interesting as well, because if the opt-out is not bothering some, then why not an opt-in? And the answer to that is because parents won't opt in.
So, Senator, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it's important. Obviously, we have age appropriate and developmentally appropriate and medically accurate. When we talk about accurate, I want to give you accurate facts. Check the bill. Go to the website, ilga.gov, Senate Bill 818. It clearly states by August 1st, 2022, the Illinois State Board of Education shall adopt rigorous education standards with the input from youth, parents, sexual health and violence prevention experts, healthcare providers, and so forth. It also clearly states that the schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials. So again, this argument that we're deferring to the national standards is simply, to borrow a word, not accurate. And by the way, don't take my word for the importance of this legislation. Look at who has supported and developed this legislation from a stakeholder standpoint. The Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, the Illinois Public Health Association, the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I will choose to stand with medical experts and survivors.
And I see Representative McCombie shaking her head, so I know that there is some disagreement here, but unfortunately we're out of time and we do have to leave it there. Lots to discuss here. My thanks to State Senator Ram Villivalam and State Representative Tony McCombie for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Plenty of people had big ideas for what their summer might have looked like had it not been for the Delta variant, further pushing back a full reopening of society. That seemingly endless cycle of decreasing, then increasing case numbers has left some feeling as if they are in pandemic purgatory. Joining us to explain what that is and how to improve mental well-being is David Rakowski, a licensed clinical psychologist and the president of Wellington Counseling Group. Mr. Rakowski, thank you so much for joining us. So how does this the COVID surge that we are in right now, how does it impact our mental health differently from previous surges?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here tonight. Thanks for bringing me on. And I'll tell you what's interesting to me is that as I talk to patients and I talk to many of my staff who talk to patients, this is so different from a year ago when we would have been talking about sort of just a pandemic fatigue. When you're in pandemic purgatory, it seems that there's no solid ground to make any plans with. We felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel. There was a vaccine, and that most people would be taking it and we'd be out of this by now, making plans, dates, all kinds of things. And now it seems that for the time being, we're kind of out of traction again.
And so, you know, as you said, you've called it, you know, pandemic purgatory. What is the effect of that sort of never-ending cycle of sort of not seeing the end in sight?
I think of it as a purgatory because I think there's these tasks as a society we have to accomplish before we can move on. So how does it leave us feeling? Well, we're humans, and humans evolved on this planet as big brain planners. That's what we do. When we can't do it, we get very upset. We're pretty spoiled in our society in the sense that our forebears didn't have quite the ability of stable society that we have to do that. But now we're getting a taste of what it's like to not have the stability we thought we had. So am I seeing hopelessness? Yes. I'm seeing depression? Yes. I'm seeing a lot of anger. But I'll tell you that the news yesterday of a Pfizer FDA full approval has given some people I'm talking to a little boost.
And you know, you've talked about like being able to plan for the future, and you know, it gives all of us something to look forward to, but also just to know what to expect in our lives. And why is that important to us? Why do we need that?
We crave the ability to plan. And, you know, we're not just a single system moving through our lives. We are embedded in multiple systems. And all these things rely on sort of a planning and coordinating with each other. And that is just out the window, at least for the time being. And until we can get solid footing and the ability to make those plans we started making over the last several months again, I think there's going to be a lot of frustration, particularly for people who aren't used to dealing with frustration.
In the meantime, how do we escape pandemic purgatory?
Well, there is no escape, but I think it's fair to say that there's a way to embrace this period because it won't be here forever. And I think it's important for us to recognize that, you know, life is not always so certain, that we may have been living for a long time with this illusion that things are certain and there's all kinds of ways that we can plan for the future. But Mother Nature tells us that it's not so. And what that means is that we can sleep on it. We can take a breath. We can not be pushed into making these decisions and wait another day and feel it out and learn to be okay with that until we can start planning again.
With that said, and knowing that that is the case, how do people sort of build hopefulness when the future is difficult to see?
I've always found that when we talk to people we trust and talk to people who know us and talk to people we love and care about, these things become ultimately accomplished and easier to get through. So stay connected to some kind of affiliation group or friendships and buddies that you can turn to when you're getting to that point of frustration.
And one such group that, of course, is facing a lot of pressure right now, parents, students, teachers, school staff, as schools head back into the classroom, many of them in person. What advice do you have for folks who are going back into the classroom and are nervous about making that transition?
Well, first of all, make sure that you are protected and make sure that your child is protected. You know, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I follow the science. And, you know, as soon as you can get a vaccine, get that vaccine, unless your doctor tells you it's a bad idea. As soon as your kids are eligible for it, make sure that they get that vaccine. And in the meantime, just remember that the mask is the best way to protect us and protect each other.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Good advice from Dr. David Rakowski at the Wellington Counseling Group. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
All right, thanks, Brandis. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, elected officials across the state have long dipped into their campaign funds to pay legal fees, but a recent opinion from the Chicago Ethics Board sets new boundaries. 26% of black Chicago public school students experience homelessness during their time at the district. A look at the impact. Jeff Tweedy of Wilco joins us to talk about touring with the band after a long hiatus and what he loves about Chicago. And a local bakery brings together young adults with autism to bake unique desserts while building social and work skills. But first, some more of today's top stories. State public health officials record just under 3,000 new cases of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, along with 15 deaths. At the same time, public health data shows that 84% of ICU hospital beds in the Chicago region are occupied, with even greater percentages in many downstate counties. Governor J.B. Pritzker says the state would have to return to some pre-vaccine mitigations if those hospital numbers get worse.
If hospitals continue to fill, if the hospital beds and ICUs get full like they are in Kentucky, that's just next door to Illinois, if that happens, we're going to have to impose significantly greater mitigations.
And you probably heard the sad news in the rock and roll world by now. Rolling Stones founding drummer Charlie Watts has died. Watts has been with the legendary band since 1963. I don't think he founded the band, but he was one of the early members. He'd recently announced he'd have to sit out their upcoming tour due to a medical procedure. Watts and the Stones have significant ties to Chicago. They recorded their album 2120 South Michigan Avenue at the legendary Chess Records, located at that very address. The band has played numerous shows here, including most recently in 2019 at Soldier Field and at places like the United Center and even the old Double Door Lounge. According to WXRT radio DJ Ryan Arnold, Watts' jazz influence, stripped-down drumming was the backbone of the Stones.
I remember when they walked out on stage and Charlie Watts snapped that snare and kicked that bass drum. It was like this sound flew across the crowd and hit you like a truck in the chest. That's Charlie Watts.
And Chicago blues great Buddy Guy, who the Stones have credited as a huge inspiration to them, posted his condolences along with this picture today. And Watts was 80 years old. And speaking of rock and roll, earlier today I went one-on-one with one of Chicago's most notable members of that club, Jeff Tweedy of Wilco. Here's Wilco performing an intimate show in Chicago just before the shutdown. The band has a performance this upcoming weekend at Millennium Park. Tweedy is a multiple Grammy Award winner and New York Times best-selling author. He joined us from his tour bus in Boston and said he was reeling from the news that had just broke at that time about Charlie Watts, but he was still kind enough to continue with our scheduled interview. I began by asking Tweedy what it's been like to play in front of live audiences, that is, after so much time off.
It's been great on just being reminded of how powerful it is to have a communal experience surrounding music and getting to see people that are very obviously out for the first time, probably in a year and a half. I ask the audience every night if it's their first time, and it's pretty sizable percentage every night. It's the first time they've gone and done something similar to a rock concert since everything was shut down. And you know, it's just a beautiful thing to get to be a part of. I will say it's a little bit scarier than we had anticipated. We have to be very, very careful. We're being really as strict as we can possibly be with our protocols, but it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful to get to do what we love to do again.
How does that much time off impact your dynamic together on stage now?
Well, I think, you know, John, our bass player, been in the band for as long as I have. He said it, I think, best when we first started playing. We've done this a lot more than we haven't done this. You know, just a year and a half off isn't really that much in the grand scheme of things when you consider we've been a band for 30 years. So, and that's the way it feels. It came back, the connection and the band chemistry seems seems to be back fully intact. And in a lot of ways, it feels better than ever, because I think there's a deep appreciation of getting to do it again when we went through a period that's not that long, I guess, by general standards, but there was something added to that moment of not playing. We weren't sure when we would play again. So I think that being taken away, this knowledge that it was going to happen, probably made us appreciate it more.
And you personally did do a lot of playing in quarantine. You had the Tweedy show on Instagram, filmed by your wife and then involving your two kids. Let's take a quick look at that.
Gonna take a meteor shower.
So you filmed, I think, 200 episodes of this. Did you imagine when you started this that it would go on and become what it became?
No, we didn't have any idea that it was going to be something that we would continue to do frequently. It just, the initial response was kind of heartwarming from the first time. We did it on my wife's account to kind of keep it a little bit lower profile than if we'd done it on the Wilco account or my own account. And people kind of found us, and it just seemed like a good way to spend the evening, and for us, and other people seemed to enjoy kind of hanging out with us, is what it really felt like. And it felt like that really almost immediately. So we just kept doing it. And next thing, that's how things go. Next thing you know, we've done 100 shows and we have a theme song, and we just kept adding to it because we were having fun, and it was a coping strategy, and it was really feeling like a supportive thing to do for the community, and there was a community that was responding to it.
You're continuing that, it seems, with a new Substack newsletter that you're basically updating on a daily basis. It's called Starship Casual. So tell us about some of the things you're posting on there.
Well, one of the other things I've learned in the last 5 or 6 years is that I enjoy writing prose, and I like getting to share that there's another outlet to do that other than writing books, and that's what the Substack has become. And I also create so many more songs than I'm able to finish or get to record or to share or release. And it's just another outlet for me to kind of feel some connection to these songs by sharing them, getting some reaction, allowing there to be an audience for some of the stuff that, a lot of things will probably end up on record someday, but they're things that I've had around for a long time, and I like them, and I want to share them with people, and this is kind of an opportunity to do that.
And one of the things you've also shared is your tips for songwriting. You mentioned you like to write prose. You're the author of 2 books. I have the latest one, How to Write One Song. I read the whole thing. It's a wonderful read. Why is it important to you to sort of let the general public in on some of your tricks of the trade in writing songs?
Well, I genuinely believe that it's a really good thing for people to do, to spend time with them, with the creative side of their brain, to spend time with themselves in a productive way. Not that they have to produce something of value or anything, just to make something that wasn't there when they woke up. I think that that's a really beautiful thing to participate in, and I think a lot of people deny themselves that, and I'm not sure why. Like, I guess the argument is that not everybody's good at writing songs, or not everyone is good at painting or creating, and I find that strange, because we allow ourselves to do all kinds of things we're not good at. We, play beer league softball, and nobody doesn't want to throw a frisbee because they suck at it. Well, maybe they do, but they at least give it a shot. And I think that creating is sort of the same thing. It's just a healthy activity that I would like to share my belief in it. And as far as like tricks of the trade, well, that's kind of the point of the book in a way, is like you can do all of the same tricks I use in terms of generating language or ideas, but you're you, and you're not going to make what I make. And even if you set out to make something that you think sounds like something I would make, it won't land in that spot. I think that's the beauty of it. I think that's what kind of the point of it is, to find out more about yourself and to find out who that is, that you really are.
Jeff, I got to ask you, you got a show coming up at Millennium Park on Saturday. You played a lot of great venues, just played Red Rocks. Do you get any special kick out of playing a hometown show, especially at a venue like that, you know, right in the heart of the city?
Hometown shows are exciting and electric, and you know, they're always a lot of fun. And, you know, the only problem with hometown shows is that I know my neighbors might be there, and that creates a little bit of inhibition. Or, you know, it's always a lot more stressful for my wife, who has to manage all of the ticket requests and things like that come along with playing in a town where we know a lot more people.
And I mean, you've stuck in Chicago for your entire career. You talk about that space, that loft you have in Irving Park that's so essential to your creativity. I mean, how important has it been for you to be based here, to you as an artist and to you as a person?
Oh, I love Chicago. It's, you know, I travel all over the world, and I walk around a lot of cities marveling at how beautiful they are. And then I come home to Chicago and I realize that if I didn't live there, I would be blown away by things that I'm taking for granted sometimes. But I love Chicago. My family loves Chicago. The pace of it, the space that we've been able to create in this, you know, old warehouse for 20 years or so now. We've had time to allow it to grow up around us as you know, an inspiring space to be in. Yeah, it's hard to picture being able to do what I do without the backdrop of Chicago.
All right, well, Jeff Tweedy, you'll be back here, as we mentioned, next weekend for the show at Millennium Park. You're currently in Boston. Safe travels, and thank you so much again for joining us.
Wonderful talking to you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You as well. Thanks.
All right, bye.
Our conversation earlier today with Jeff Tweedy, he also spoke with us about everything from the band's COVID protocols to reparations for black musicians. Be sure to check out the entire interview on our website. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
The Chicago Board of Ethics has a warning for the city's elected officials. Think twice before creating a legal defense fund. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now to explain. So, Heather, the board says that Chicago officials need to refrain from accepting financial help from supporters through a legal fund. What prompted the board to make this decision?
Well, an anonymous city official asked the board to issue an advisory opinion on whether this would run afoul of the city's government and ethics ordinance, and the board decided that it would, because that ordinance prevents alder people and the mayor and the city treasurer and the city clerk from accepting gifts from people who are not their relatives or personal friends, and contributions to a legal defense fund, especially if there was one on like GoFundMe or another online fundraiser, would violate that prohibition on gifts.
So does the advisory say whether elected officials can accept financial help at all?
really only from their relatives and personal friends. And the board defines personal friends as people they knew before they assumed elected office and have a relationship with them that's not related to their official duties. So that is probably not enough to raise enough money to fund a legal defense.
And I would imagine also, if you've been in office for a long time, the people that you knew before might not be quite as many because you've held office for so long. But also, Heather, what are the repercussions for accepting prohibited gifts?
Well, you could face fines of between $1,000 and $5,000, and particularly egregious cases could lead to removal from office. So the ethics board's warning was pretty strong, especially at a time when there are 3 sitting aldermen, Alderman Ed Burke, Alderman Kerry Austin, and Alderperson Patrick Daley Thompson, who are under federal indictment. We, of course, don't know if they asked for this opinion, but they are facing some hefty bills in the days and weeks to come.
Okay, and there could be more for folks who do violate the advisory. The repercussions could end up being more legal trouble. Lastly, Heather, what about campaign contributions? Can older people use that to pay legal fees?
They can, and Alderman Ed Burke has spent millions of dollars on his defense in his ongoing criminal case, as has former House Speaker Michael Madigan and disgraced former Alderman Danny Solis. Now, 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez asked a court to prevent elected officials from using campaign cash to pay legal bills. However, that legal effort did not succeed, although he did appeal to the Illinois Supreme Court. So for now, campaign cash is okay. Gifts, not so much, at least in Chicago.
All right, tricky territory. Thank you, Heather Sharon, for breaking it all down for us.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And up next, addressing student homelessness in a conversation that first aired on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. But first, a look at the weather. One in 7 Chicago public school students experience homelessness during their time at the district. That's according to a recent study by the University of Chicago's Inclusive Economy Lab. Researchers found that black students disproportionately feel the impacts of this, with 26% of them experiencing homelessness compared to 4% of Hispanic students and 2% of white students. Joining us to discuss the data and how teachers and staff can support students are Liz Dozier, founder and CEO of Chicago Beyond, and Carmelo Barbaro, Executive Director of the Inclusive Economy Lab at UChicago. Thanks to both of you for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Liz, let's start with you, please. Before we get into the data from the study, first explain some of the various forms of homelessness that can happen for students.
Yeah, so homelessness is a much more common experience among CPS students than previously recognized. And students who are enrolled in CPS for at least 4 years, we know have actually a 1 in 10 chance of experiencing homelessness. And students who are experiencing homelessness are overwhelmingly Black. They're living doubled up, and they're at risk for decreased GPA, attendance, and honestly, the high school graduation. So this is very serious. I was a principal. Roughly almost 50% of our students at the school at one point qualified to be a part of the students in temporary living situations. And this can look like students living, again, doubled up. It can look like students couch surfing. It can look like students living in shelters. We know that just having a safe and stable home is a basic need for our young people, and whether it's homelessness, unstable housing, or just the unavailability of just affordable housing in general, it just affect our young people's future, their earning potential, their health, coupled with, not to mention, which the report talks about, this trauma, this physical and mental health, and the fatigue that comes with those many experiences.
Right.
And we know that the combination of that disinvestment in structural racism has actually created those conditions. So there are things that we can begin to work on to help mitigate these issues.
Right, and I definitely want to get to that, because it sounds like, homelessness, it's not just living on the streets or in an encampment. Like you said, there can be students doubled up, couch surfing. Carmelo, what did the study find about the prevalence of housing instability for CPS students?
Well, as you noted, and as Liz noted a few moments ago, I think we were really surprised to learn just how prevalent an experience this is in CPS. but also really troublingly, the very, very disproportionate impact on the city's Black community. So we never imagined when we began our research that we would find that 1 in 4 Black students would at some point during their time in CPS experience homelessness. So that was, I think, one big shocking realization. But a second thing that we learned through our conversations with students and families, principals, school liaisons, is that these students really want to be engaged in school. They really value learning. They can talk in a really compelling way about the ways in which going to school will benefit them and their families in the long run. But then the third thing that we saw, which was, perhaps unsurprising, but still nevertheless should be a call for action for all of us, is that these outside of school factors end up impacting students' experiences in school. So, students talked about the stigma that they felt coming to school, with their classmates knowing that they were homeless or maybe sort of not dressed in the way that they wanted to be dressed. They talked about the challenges sort of getting to school on time and consistently. And when we actually look at the data and we control for prior attendance and educational attainment, we do see that experiencing homelessness for the first time has a significant negative impact on both attendance and grades. And so there's a way in which, the housing insecurity that students experience can actually kind of perpetuate some of the disparities that exist in our city.
So Taishi Newman is a mother of 3 CPS students who have experienced homelessness while attending school. At the time, Newman and her children lived with her cousin. Here's what she said about how this impacted her children.
The impact they had was only because when it's time to learn, do their homework and stuff, it's much harder when you have to keep your thoughts to yourself about why my mama can't buy my paper and why I have to borrow paper from my cousins.
Carmelo, you just addressed this a bit, but what did you find about the impact of housing instability on student success at school? Yeah, so, as I said, we found that, on average, in their very first year of experiencing homelessness, elementary school students will miss an extra week of school compared to students who had the sort of same prior academic performance. And for high school students, that increases dramatically, and, students can miss up to 2 weeks of school, particularly if they're not living with their parent or guardian during that first year that they're experiencing homelessness. So there's a direct connection between that housing instability and their ability to get to school consistently. And you can't learn if you're not in school. And so we do see that impact on grades as well. I just wanted to point out that, living doubled up, that, staying at a guest in somebody else's home, couch surfing, is a sort of invisible type of homelessness. But nevertheless, it is really traumatic for a lot of young people. And we heard that in the focus groups and interviews that we did. And I think that segment sort of captures some of the small, but nevertheless really important ways in which it can impact students. Liz, we know that you were the principal at Finger for 6 years, and you just mentioned that, at some point, about 50% of your student population there had experienced or could experience homelessness. How do you see homelessness impact your students, or how did you see it impact your students when you were principal?
I mean, it was exactly what that parent, laid out a second ago in that clip. It's everything from, a child, feeling less than as they're in the classroom, feeling a sense of shame, why they can't have, why they don't have the particular things that maybe other students have. But also I saw it affect academic outcomes. That's why it's so important for schools. And there have been schools across the city, and even Chicago Public Schools as a whole has really taken a stand at, destigmatizing the homelessness status. And the report that the Inclusive Economies Lab just put out really details is the importance of destigmatizing the homeless status, knowing our young people, knowing their stories, like who they are, what's happening in their lives, and really sweating the small stuff, meeting the basic needs of our young people. That just cannot be underestimated as we think about the school really being a lighthouse for our young people and our young people's families.
Carmelo, as we heard earlier, homelessness has disproportionately impacted the Black community. Why such a stark disparity there?
Well, while we were surprised initially to see the very, very high rates of homelessness experienced by the city's Black community, it wasn't surprising sort of in context. The Black residents in Chicago have been excluded from economic opportunity and wealth building opportunities for decades. Black mothers are much more likely than other groups to experience an eviction, and an eviction record is often held against you when you go to secure your next apartment. Due to over-policing, Black fathers are more likely to have contact with the criminal justice system, and that's often held against you when you apply for housing. And so you can see how sort of all of these different forces can kind of combine to limit access to safe, stable, and affordable housing for an entire community. And so, while we were sort of shocked initially, I think when you take that kind of historic view and you really think about these broader forces, it's maybe less surprising, but it does mean that we have to really be working to undo all of those things so that we can achieve the sort of equity and educational outcomes that we desire.
And of course, as you mentioned, the study does include strategies to support students and the role that schools can play. Unfortunately, we're out of time to talk about those even further. So my thanks to Liz Dozier and Carmelo Barbaro for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
According to a Drexel University study, 42% of young adults with autism never worked for pay in their 20s. That's a statistic that reflects the difficulty many people with autism can have in making the transition from school into the working world. But a Chicago woman has cooked up a way for those young adults to develop crucial social and work skills while contributing their own unique flavors to the business. Chicago Tonight's Erica Gunderson has the story.
We've got some vanilla cupcakes here. Some are filled with coconut cream and others are filled with passion fruit.
The aromas wafting through this West Side kitchen make it obvious where the sweet in the name Unique Sweets comes from.
We're topping them with some coconut. That's what Shannon's doing here.
I'm putting coconut on for the cupcakes to make it pretty.
And then Jeremiah's cutting marshmallows, and then that'll be the final product.
The unique part? That's another story.
The treats that we make are unique, especially since they're made by unique individuals, hence Unique Sweets.
Christina Torres and her fellow bakers are members of the social enterprise Unique Sweets. By baking treats like these cupcakes, which they sell at pop-up events and through social media, the teens and young adults with autism who participate are developing work and social skills. Founder Lisa Curiel says there is a place for everyone to contribute in their kitchen.
Autism is different for everybody. There's no two people that are the same or that experience it the same. We try to find something for everybody. And everybody transitions through all of the process so that everyone has an opportunity to find what they like.
Lisa started Unique Sweets from her home kitchen in 2018 to help her son Sebastian, who has autism, bridge the gap between school and the working world.
He had finished high school and he was in City College and he wasn't ready to get a job, and I felt like him and his friends had so much potential. And one day, the story is, and we laugh about it, is that they had a party and they all brought baked goods. And it just struck me as though this was something that we could combine, use a little project management, use some job skills training, and then bake because they like to bake, and it was kind of an instant project. And that's how it started.
Sebastian is no longer in the kitchen, but Lisa says he is still using skills he learned through Unique Sweets to help it grow.
He works with me on purchasing and inventory and getting things ready for the actual bake and all that background work that has to happen. Not everybody wants to pursue a degree in pastry or culinary arts. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to have to interact with others, you're going to have to plan. And what I hope that they get from their time with us is a sense of achievement, that they can do it and that they can take those skills and apply them to the next chapter in their life.
In David Figueroa's case, he found a way to use his art skills to decorate more than cupcakes.
David loves to draw. That is his thing. He'll do art to go with that holiday or whatever we're doing. And then he'll put a message on there, and then he puts it right on the box when it's ready to get picked up.
David is nonverbal, which his mother says sometimes made it difficult to find community.
We have had a really hard time finding organizations and things where he can be a part of, where what he enjoys and his, what he's able to do is highlighted. And so it made me feel like he had a place, there was something for him, that he can have there was a future for him. It made us feel better about our future in terms of, his independence.
Omaida says she too has found a sense of belonging with Unique Sweets.
It's given me an opportunity to find people that kind of have the same struggles that I do and have the same celebrations that I do.
And for baker Cristina Torres, bringing her own unique flavor to that community is helping her flourish.
Was when we did the Boricua Barrio Arts Festival in Humboldt Park. And when we were, selling out all those cupcakes, especially the different flavors like the coquito, the piña colada, the pancha, that kind of gave me the indication that where I felt like I'm where I need to be right now.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
And you'll find more on Unique Sweets on our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Why many major players in the gaming industry are so far refusing to place a bet on a Chicago casino.
And Chicago's first and only national monument is preparing for its grand opening. We have an exclusive first look. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named on the 2021 expertise list of the best